Hi, I'm Alan Finney, and this is what Ayahuasca told me to tell you. You know, I was going to put everything to get ready for an Ayahuasca ceremony in one video, but after I started writing the script, it was like, no way, I'll never get everything in. So in this video, I'm going to cover the pre-ceremony diet, and that's pretty much it. But I'm actually going to cover some historical information about ayahuasca ceremonies in the Amazon from the early 1900s, which is really interesting and just highly instructive. So for me, preparing for a ceremony is really all about getting the most benefit that you can get from the ceremony. An ayahuasca ceremony is a big investment in time and preparation, and never mind the cost of the ceremony itself. So really, preparation is key to everything. So anyway, there's a lot of information on the internet about what to eat or what not to eat, and there's some practical aspects to this and some spiritual aspects to this as well. And one of the practical things is something called tyramines. If you eat enough food that contains tyramines, you can get the dreaded ayahuasca tyramine headache, which is what happened to me on my first trip to Peru. I would get these killer headaches a day after a ceremony, and I thought this was just part of the deal, maybe like a hangover or something. And it all boiled down to avocados. Down in Peru, they have these amazing avocados. I mean, you just can't get avocados like that in Canada. And I would be in the kitchen making avocados on toast, and I would find the ripest avocados they had. And the problem with ripe avocados and ripe fruit and other foods which you think would be good for an ayahuasca diet is that they're full of tyramines. So I was getting these killer tyramine headaches, which you don't have to go through. But here's the thing with ayahuasca diets in general. You'll find all kinds of different diets from all kinds of different shamans. Lots of contradictory information out there. So which diet to follow? And the easiest and the simplest thing, and what you should do, I think anyway, is that diet should come right from your shaman. I mean, he's the guy you're trusting with your ceremony. So, you know, just follow what he or she says, which makes everything pretty simple. And if your shaman isn't putting you on a diet, for me, that would be a big red flag. But that's just me. Preparation for me is a big part of the ceremony. And integration after the ceremony. And the ceremony itself, that's pretty important. Anyway, those are all other videos. And the other thing is no alcohol or pot or other psychoactives or stimulants like coffee or caffeinated teas. And what this boils down to for me is just plain foods. What I've noticed is that ayahuasca works a lot through the solar plexus chakra, or whatever that is. That's where a lot of that heavy energy is pulled from your body. So if your body is full of, rotting meat or nasty stuff blocked up in your bowels, that energy flow can be impeded, which is one of the reasons you'll find that people who are new to ayahuasca will, throw up or head to the bathroom. And that's to get rid of that heavy, dark energy, for lack of a better term. And that's all centered in your solar plexus, the solar plexus. And that's usually where people get worked on by the plant medicine. So let's talk a little bit about the spiritual aspect of the diet. And what the diet does is it pulls you out of your usual eating routine. Eating is a habit, and for the most part, we're not very conscious about it. So it's just something that we do, and it's routine. So now you're changing your diet, and that gets you thinking about why you're eating, how you're eating, and what you're preparing to do. And it's also a measure of self-discipline. So that in itself is worth doing, and it starts giving you some insights about yourself just being on the diet. And really, why are we doing ayahuasca? A lot of this work is really about self-awareness and your own spiritual practice. And the diet can help with that. Just being on a diet can help with that. So the historical information, let's reach back into some history and see how it's the Huni-Kui Indians did ceremonies. And I'm sure I'm mangling that name. And this comes from a book called The Wizard of the Upper Amazon by Bruce Lamb. And I highly recommend this book for anyone who wants to get a deep understanding of how the real Amazon Indians traditionally used ayahuasca and what they used it for. And this really is a story about a guy named Manuel Cordova Rios. In the early 1900s, he was captured by the Huni-Kui and initiated into the tribe, and he eventually became the leader of the tribe. And he was initiated into the tribe with ayahuasca. This was the early 1900s, and the rubber wars were going on at that time. So the rubber traders would come into an area and they would, kill the Indians. And the Indians, didn't have modern weapons, and they would retreat into the jungle. So anyway, the rubber wars were going on at that time, and the Huni-Kui, and I know that's probably not right, but anyway, they were fighting the rubber traders, and they were fighting other Indian tribes for territory. So these guys were the real deal. This wasn't a subjugated people. You're talking about actual warriors. These people were wild and free. So Cordova Rios was a 19-year-old rubber worker who was captured by the Huni-Kui. And the old shaman that was the leader of the tribe groomed him to take over his duties because his son was killed in a battle with another tribe. So they captured him, and one of the first things they did was to prepare him for an ayahuasca ceremony. And how they prepared him for the ceremony was a very specialized diet where he was given purgatives and other plant medicines. And the diet itself was supervised by a couple of the old ladies in the tribe. They were the only ones allowed to bring him food. The ayahuasca itself was prepared specifically by this one old tribal guy who stayed out in the forest and gathered the plants and boiled the brew, and he would be out for several days at a time. And that was the only guy allowed to prepare the ayahuasca. So that's a lot of investment in an ayahuasca ceremony. It was a very serious undertaking, and a lot of effort went into the preparations. So anyway, after Cordova Rios went through his first ceremony, he found out he had a basic understanding of the Indian language. He couldn't speak it, but he understood what was being said, which is, to me, is just amazing. And, you look at the preparation that they had, and this to me just shows the importance of proper preparation when you're getting ready for a ceremony. And, I think the lesson is pretty clear. If you want to get the most out of a ceremony, put some time and effort into the preparation, whatever that is. Ayahuasca isn't for playing games, and it's a sacred undertaking, so govern yourself accordingly. Now, having said all that, and, with me, there's always a but. And and here comes the big but. I've also seen people come into a ceremony with like 10 minutes of preparation, and they've had an incredible life-transforming ceremony. And I'll just give you a little example of this. My daughter and I were getting ready for a ceremony one afternoon, and we just happened to be standing on the back steps. And a friend of mine just happened to be driving by, and she said to herself, well, if I see them out in the yard, I'll stop in for a visit. So you know, what's the odds of that happening? So anyway, she saw us, pulled up and said, you know, what are you doing? And I'm like, we're getting ready for a ceremony. And she was like, oh, really? And I said, yeah. And I said, there's only one reason that you showed up at this time is because you're supposed to be in this ceremony. So she joined us in the ceremony, and it was fabulous. She had an amazing ceremony, and I seem to recall a lot of purging going on, but when she got rid of that, it was an incredible ceremony for her. And that's what I like about ayahuasca. You know, conventional wisdom says, you know, get prepared for a ceremony and go on the diet and put in the effort, and then ayahuasca will just come along and put somebody in a ceremony without any preparation at all, and it all just works out. Which just says to me, you can make all the excuses you want. I haven't been on a diet, I'm not ready, I haven't done the prep work. But for me, sometimes it's just like, shut up, get in a ceremony. Sometimes you have to just, you know, suck it up and bite the bullet. Anyway, this is a long video, and in our next video, I'm going to dive right into the purging part, and there's a lot to that, especially for first timers. You have to understand what's really going on with the purging. It's probably not what you think it is. And then maybe after that video, we'll get into like your first ceremony. I don't know. These videos just keep backing up the more I do them. So anyway, until then, I'm wishing you all the light and happiness and love you can handle, and all the best to you. Just keep on the path. I'm Alan Finney, and that's what ayahuasca told me to tell you.